The Overstory is kind of this manifestation of like who Rick is, and who he was when he was 17 years old. I just remember getting in the mail from him this beautiful matte sepia tone photograph of a field in winter in the Midwest with like some sort of, I think there was like a windmill or something on it and a silo, and a poem on the back called Winter Wheat that he had written. But I never actually thought about like a field, a cornfield, a fallow field in the middle of winter as being anything but that. And that poem just changed my perspective. Just that little poem, and he has this way, he just looks like literally like winter wheat, under the surface there's all this stuff going on, like he just sees what's underneath, the really important things, the seminal things, and he can express them and write about them. And so, I feel like the Overstory is just the full mature person blossoming of who he is as a person, and his capacity to do that, and like what he sees and what he sees as important, and how deeply seated in the earth it is, and how it expresses itself on the surface.
I'm amazed and tickled that you would remember that poem from 50 years ago, half a century ago. If there is something that's at the heart of my entire life as a writer, all these decades, I would say it probably is the idea of interdependence. That we are who we are, not as separate things, but as groups, as processes, as knots, as connected bundles of hopes and fears, and that when we think about ourselves, we need to think about ourselves as part of these larger processes and larger configurations. We're taught by our culture that we are individuals first. And there's a lot of emphasis on competition and achievement and personal best and be all you can be. And my work is really trying to swim upstream against that. It's trying to say that isn't who we are. None of us are what we are in and of ourselves. We're only who we are by virtue of all the connections we have to other people, to place, and to the more than human world. So to think about myself as a poet at the age of 17, already trying to see myself in the landscape, and to connect with readers through this sense of common interdependence, and to think of myself as a man of 60 writing this novel about trees, about forests, about ecosystems, and about how we humans are really entirely contingent, entirely dependent upon all kinds of other living things for our existence, is to see a kind of common thread throughout that, that writing life. And I know I went away and looked at the way that the more than human world has been handled in Western concert music for, the last few hundred years. And I found a lot of music that dealt with living things, but not surprisingly, often as individual living things. And, there's a great deal of romantic music that turns to nature for inspiration, but it's turning to nature for inspiration in a way that's very local and very personal, not always expansive and not always integrative. In other words, they were looking at living things, but not necessarily at ecologies, whole ecosystems. And the closest thing that I could find was a piece of music um, that was that had been important to me for a long time in my life when I was younger, and that was the Gustav Mahler "Song of the Earth." Uh, it, it, it's doing a number of things, but one of the things that it's definitely trying to do is to say, uh, time is long, life is big, we are small, these processes absorb us. But at the time that we were putting this together, we had to choose not just the composers, but also the textual contributions. And I wanted them to come from far and wide. And it was my idea that I would approach other writers who had devoted their life to thinking about living systems and ecology. One was Kim Stanley Robinson. He has always been devoted to this idea that who we are is just a small part of a much larger complex system. He immediately, I mean, within 1 or 2 days, said, I will give you one of my favorite ecological texts of all time, and it's from Thoreau's notebooks. I then thought of Joan Maloof. Joan is an educator, a writer who has written several very influential books about forest and ways of seeing forests and being part of forests. And she came up with this beautiful text by Anne La Bastille, and it was such a wonderful compliment to the Thoreau text that I was immediately seeing relationships and hearing continuity and kinship. Finally, I approached Bill McKibben, and I think it's pretty safe to say that no one alive has done more than Bill in bringing the awareness of our precarious moment in history to the minds of mainstream Americans. When he wrote back, it almost moved me to tears. He said, I'm going to give you what I think is the oldest environmental text in written history. And he suggested this passage from Job, where Job, who has just complained to God about the way that he's handling things, is dressed down by God and put in his place. As God says, who are you to complain about the way that these enormous processes that are beyond you are working? And what we needed was connective tissue. We needed something tonal that would anchor them in place and allow each of these journeys into the meaning of these prose passages to come back to a mood, a feeling, a warmth that was more lyrical or more expansive in its use of words. And for that, I looked in particular at two of my longtime favorite poets, W.S. Merwin and Wendell Berry. They complemented each other wonderfully. And when I looked at all these texts, the three prose pieces and the three poems, there was a kind of natural sequence that I saw in them leading from alienation to integration, from despair toward reassertion. Laura urged me to use a small passage from the Overstory to tie them all together, a passage that very explicitly talks to this necessity for breaking down this sense that we are somehow outside of this system of remembering and returning to the living world.
But what I tell people is, we tried to create a piece of music that echoed the way that the world works, the way that nature works, the way that trees communicate, that there's music that's interconnected by little themes, but also by bigger feelings and thought processes that go into the creation of it together, that makes this beautiful flow that becomes bigger than any small part of it.
Once we had made the decision to give each composer a specific role, but to do so in a way that they could always react to what the others were doing.
I mean, the four people working in this piece have distinct fingerprints. You would never mistake the music of one for the music of the other. But I knew that if they were given this, and if they were, if they were told this is part of a community, that they would find some way, as in a forest, of bringing their very distinctive fingerprints together into one ecosystem.
There's more than one composer, and we work together and we're friends, and that the piece gives the listener an experience of trees and the way they're connected, which is rather poetic when you think of us collaborating.
We write very differently from each other, so I didn't know how that was going to work artistically. But I amazingly enough, I think we found a way to write a piece that's coherent and really works very effectively.
And learning to work together in that role was a tremendous and humbling and experience.
I had the wonderful role in this work to come in more towards the end of the composing process, study the songs that my colleagues, Eric Moe, Stephen Jaffe, and Melinda Wagner wrote, study those songs, those scores, and find ways to write narrated movements that serve as connective links, connective tissue throughout the piece.
I'm really humbled by this model and by the ways in which my colleagues, writers, performers, composers, worked successfully together.
I love Merwin's work, but I thought that piece was a great entry point because it sort of enters the piece through the urban experience, through the built landscape of no voices and no shade. And then the piece as it unfolds after that is all about, entering, in living with, it's treeier the rest of the world.
I really love the moment the Job movement starts.
Who is this whose ignorant words smear my design with darkness? Stand up now like a man. I will question you. Please, instruct me.
It's a moment that yanks you out of what your expectations might be if you've never heard the piece before, because the difference between your style and Eric's style is so striking that you realize, this is why this is such a great idea, because you have the opening movement, this wonderful soprano aria that finishes so kind of beautifully with those Mahler harmonies. And then suddenly there's this crash and the narrator comes in, and it's a completely different kind of music.
Well, I think each movement it illuminates a different facet of what a forested landscape is like and what it means to us as human beings. I mean, there's a lot of elegiac stuff in the piece, but there's also there are hopeful things as well.
Sometimes at night, when a problem has me turning and twisting in the silence.
My favorite part of it is the En La Bastille narration, which actually stays with me. Like, I think about it all the time. And I actually just read her book this summer. That narration is the very end of the book. It's the last words that she writes in the book, and it's all about just thanking nature for nature, thanking nature for her being able to be there at this moment, just there, under the stars, in the water, surrounded by trees, just being there,
Some stars burn out.
What I think the success of the work is the different ways in which the text is relayed.
I am looking at trees.
A Forest Unfolding's movements are quite varied. They have different weights. Not every piece is languorous or delivered slowly. It was great adventure for me, and I think all of us feel that way, and I think lots of audiences have felt that way too. What an adventure.
My heart leaps into my mouth at the sound of the wind in the woods.
The experience of the audience when they realize that this is not going to be a piece like any other you've ever heard, because when they realize the value and the beauty of having multiple voices, I think that's one of the great things that the piece has to offer.
Well, Wendell Berry sets up this dichotomy. There is the natural world, woodlands and grasslands mentioned in the poem, but on the other hand, there is a certain dreaming that happens. The trees are dreaming of their natural life, and then there's this reference to pavement and of things being built over the trees and over the roots. So there's a pull there between those two different worlds, and there's a sadness to the poem.
Remembers the old.
In the eternal rhythm movement, for example, you can hear this. You can hear the rhythm is derived from Das Lied von der Erde. Garner borrows the same chords, and they become the basis of Eternal Song with Richard Powers' beautiful text.
When you look at a forest, I mean, if it's been a while, and if you have been separated, you might initially just see a big green blur, just branches and green stuff, leaves and trunks, and your ability to be literate in that is very limited. The more time you spend there, the more time you walk there and sit there and simply, hold still under these trees, the more definition you start to see. And in any forest, even the ones that seem most monotonic to us at first glance, you begin to see that what's really happening is a kind of specialization and a kind of diversification, a kind of filling of all the possible niches. You see trees that are short and spiky. You see trees that are thin and towering and have are fighting to get up into the canopy. You see trees that bulk out and create specially shaped leaves for catching light at a certain elevation in the forest. You see, you see all of the incredible possibilities of shape and the variety, and you almost begin to assign personalities or characters to the different qualities and colors and shapes and solutions that the forest has come up with. In a way, that's what we do as makers too. We're finding ways of going into all kinds of different palettes and all kinds of different sensibilities and locations, but we're also saying, just beyond this is a very different thing. And I can lead you over that hill into the river, and I can cross that river and bring you into the deep, dark forest.